Welcome to Primetime Live with Coach Carrie, your fitness and well-being advisor for thePause. Today, I'm really excited because we have Dr. Paul Arciero to interview about protein pacing. Dr. Paul is a world-leading nutrition and performance scientist. He has published over 60 peer-reviewed articles and is the pioneer behind protein pacing and the prize life. He's been featured in several publications, including Men's Health, Time Magazine, Prevention, and the prestigious Nature Communications Scientific Journal. So, Dr. Paul, welcome to the Prime Time with Coach Carrie. Are you ready to talk about some awesome concepts from your amazing book?
Absolutely, Carrie. Yes, let's dive in.
Awesome. I have your book right here in my hands because I had to get it
Yeah.
when I heard that the whole book is about some things that are really important to me, like protein pacing, resistance training, interval training, stretching, endurance. Like this is the big picture when it comes to health. We're going to focus in on protein pacing and nutrient timing today, and we're going to do a series of these great interviews with you talking about some of the other concepts in your book. But let's dig into protein because we know that in perimenopause and menopause, we often have to shift, especially as a woman in perimenopause or menopause, we have to shift how we look at the nutrients we're taking in. So tell everybody what protein pacing is and why is protein so important for women at this stage in life?
Yeah, so let's start with protein pacing. Protein pacing is really three easy concepts. The first one is the consumption, nourishing of the highest quality protein we can feed our bodies with. So that's the starting point. It's not about any type. It's starting with, most importantly, the highest quality protein that we can consume. The second important principle of protein pacing is in the right amount, the right quantity. So quality first, quantity second. And for most people, Carrie, it ranges between 30 and 50 grams is the amount that people should be taking in. And then the third and final point or major concept of protein pacing is the distribution, making sure that you are nourishing your body on as close as possible of a 4-hour feeding cycle. That's when we have scientifically determined that that's how the body responds the best to absorbing nutrients and then readying itself for the next round.
So we need to eat about every 4 hours. So that means, there's a lot of talk out there about intermittent fasting, and I do fasting days to get those deep benefits of the 24-hour fast. But there's a lot of people talking about, how they only eat in a small window. And I even know someone that told me she doesn't eat until dinner, and then she gets all her macros in dinner. And I don't know how that's possible, but you're advocating to start eating and protein pace, so have protein at every meal every 3 to 4 hours or so throughout the day?
I am, yeah. That concept that you're describing, we call it time restricted eating,
Mhm.
TRE. And it really burst onto the scene. And for many people, it has been used effectively to help them manage their weight. But
Mm,
it doesn't tell the whole story. From the science that we've been able to now determine, it's not the best way to preserve your lean muscle mass. And
mm,
so it's not an ideal eating pattern for the long term. And I think that's what's a little bit deceptive about it is that for many people, they are managing their weight really well using it. But that's the only outcome really, and that's not the most important. We know that body composition is much more important than you just maintaining a healthy weight. A healthy weight is definitely important, but for long-term health,
mhm.
we know that our body composition is priority number one. So there's a couple of other things. It's not ideal for people that want to have also performance gains. So if you're somebody who's looking to compete or you're looking for a fitness health advantage, it's not the best way. So I don't want to completely toss it out. I
Mhm.
just want to let people understand that it's on a next level down of protein pacing where you're eating right from the beginning of the wake up time getting that first very high quality serving of protein. And so people often, comment that, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. And the science shows that it is. It
Mm.
still is. So eating something that's really high quality nourishment, with protein of the highest quality, that's the best start to the day. It
So
wins it every.
speaking of good quality protein, let's transition into that question. What would be some good protein choices? Do you prefer plant-based, whey in a supplement? What should I look for if I'm choosing a protein shake? What are the best choices when it comes to foods and maybe with supplements or meal replacement shakes?
Yeah, there's been a lot of science on this, and again, there's not a lot of debate, but in terms of rank order, we know that grass-fed, undenatured whey protein is of the highest quality
Hmm.
protein your bodies can utilize, and the reason is because it's the closest matched to our protein stores in our body. So our bodies have a relatively easy time absorbing and metabolizing that source of protein. And then there's other animal sources. Animals sources are just better absorbed by most humans.
Hmm.
And so things like pasture-raised eggs, wild-caught fish, obviously grass-fed beef. Um, Again, wild other forms of just out in nature animal sources are still the best. Greek
Hmm.
yogurt from grass-fed milk, things like that. And then protein sources. But with protein, you have to be a little bit more savvy. And what I mean by that is you need to have protein sources that are complementing each other. There's not
Mm.
one source of plant-based protein
Yeah.
that is really good for us. So with plant-based proteins, we have to, like I said, make sure that we're combining them together. Things like um, fava beans, mung bean, pea protein, certain forms of soy, brown rice protein, quinoa, things like that. So you have to blend these things together in order to get a high quality protein that is much more easily obtained through the consumption of an animal source.
Right, just to make sure you're getting all the amino acids with,
Amino acids, yes, it
yeah,
all comes down. That's what I mean by the quality. Exactly. The
right.
quality of protein is all based on the composition of the amino acid profile found within the food. And we know that animal-based sources are of the highest amino acid profile in as close of a resemblance to what humans have. And so
Yeah.
that's why you want to do it.
Yeah, you need to put some time and effort into searching if you're going to just do plant-based. And I was listening to a woman who, just talking about going, and she wrote a book actually with a bunch of experts. She's not an expert herself, but she was talking about going into perimenopause and menopause and seeing her LDL rise, like just suddenly overnight, basically. LDL goes up, she's all of a sudden pre-diabetic and she's not that overweight. She exercises, she eats, but she had also switched years prior to just a vegan lifestyle and she'd even cut out fish and she'd cut out dairy. So luckily she saw a good practitioner who was recognizing the fact that all this plant-based protein was also high carb and not really serving her well for where she was at this stage in life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Our bodies are in a constant state of trying to establish and maintain what we call homeostasis. And I refer to homeostasis as harmony
Mm.
inside of our body. When our body is in harmony, we're in homeostasis. It's where we prefer to be functioning. And when we are exposing our body to environments or situations that are not optimal, the body will do the best that it can to try to defend itself for survival. And yeah, there's no doubt. And I'll just give you a classic example. When we begin to withhold a nutrient that we need, our
Mm.
body um, doesn't like that. And so it'll try to compensate on its own. Cholesterol is a great example. When people stopped eating eggs for a long time, misinformed, by the way. Our body needs cholesterol. That's a silly thought, for anyone out there. There's only very, very rare, small fractions of the population that have dyslipidemia, hypercholesterolemia, familial. We call it familial hypercholesterolemia, which is a genetic aberration that would cause their cholesterol to go up. But again, it's a
Mm.
very, very small number of people. So for 99.9% of the population, we need cholesterol. We need to eat it in our diet because our cells require it. And when we stop eating cholesterol, our body begins to manufacture it on its own. And sometimes when it tries to do that, it overcompensates. And so by eating no cholesterol, you can actually elevate your cholesterol higher
Mhm.
than what it should be. So I always find that interesting because I've had a number of vegetarians that have come into my research studies, and I've measured their blood and I report back to them to say, oh, you've got high, I don't know if you're aware of this, but your cholesterol is high. And they absolutely look shocked.
It's
They say
shocking. Yeah.
they say that's impossible. I eat no cholesterol. And they really do because we analyze their diet. And in their diet, they have no cholesterol,
Mhm.
but their LDLs and their cholesterol level is very high. And it's a real awakening and a real wake-up call for them. So, yeah, we have to just do a better job of informing people of things that our bodies need. And once
Mhm.
we put them in that comfort zone. So, yeah, that's a really good example. Plants are super healthy for us. And so I don't want to put them.
Yeah, we need them, but they need to be a complement. And if you're going to just use plant-based protein, you might, especially in perimenopause and menopause, need to rethink if you're using any sources of maybe dairy, maybe bring some yogurt back in, and just how much are you
Absolutely.
cutting back, right?
That's right.
So, talking about women specifically, how much protein does your average woman need? I'm 5'6", I weigh about 143 pounds, I'm muscular. What do I base my protein on? How much I need in a day?
Yeah. So here in the States, we use pounds. You can use kilograms as well. But generally speaking, when it comes to the amount that you should be consuming, it's roughly zero point 0.8 to 1 grams per pound of body weight. So if you're 140 pounds, a woman would want to aim for somewhere between 125 and 140 grams of protein. That equates to, as we've talked about, probably 30 to 35
Mm,
grams of protein at each of your four
yeah,
protein pacing meals, right? You just do simple math. 30 times 4 is 120. 35 times 4 is 140. So yeah, that's the sweet spot. There's, very little debate about that, just based on scientific research that's been now conducted for the last, 3 to 4 decades, that is definitely the sweet spot. So, one really important point though, Carrie, as a woman who's over the age of 40, who's starting to enter into that, pre, uh, yeah, perimenopausal years. It's really important just in general. After the age of 35, our bodies have a much harder time maintaining our lean body mass. So
yeah.
our protein requirement, whether you're a man or a woman, goes up by 10 to 20%. And so, what I would encourage someone, in the example that you just gave, or somebody who's listening to this podcast, if you're a woman and you're over the age of 40, for sure, you want to up that amount by a minimum of 5 to 10%.
Mm,
So if you're aiming for 130 grams of protein over the course of a day, you should be somewhere around 140, just because our bodies don't have the same efficiency
hmm.
of absorbing those amino acids from the protein and then distributing them into the cells so that they can perform their functions. So that's a really important point. And especially as women are moving through menopause and into post-menopause, they definitely need to be in that higher range and some, in order for them to maintain that healthy lean body mass.
So we need our protein for that healthy lean body mass. And I mean, even just being a fitness athlete, so I know all the benefits of protein, and I've definitely been protein pacing in my athletic career. I was eating 5 or 6 times a day, and every meal had to
Yeah.
have protein. But that would also keep me satisfied, satiated, like so I wouldn't be having the hunger as much or the craving. So protein really plays a key role for, I think, eating behavior too, right?
Oh, so much so. Yeah. So I talk a lot about the body composition because that's priority number one. Because when you have a healthy body in terms of your muscle mass, it supports your bone mass, it supports your brain. So, and your mind, your cognitive function. So yeah, I like to target the body composition first in terms of the role that protein plays in our body because it infiltrates and impacts everything about our health. But absolutely, a healthy amount of protein triggers the brain, the hypothalamus, and the arcuate nucleus, which is the little higher brain center in the brain, that determines whether or not we're hungry or not. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, by having that healthy amount of protein, you better regulate how much food you need and how
Mhm.
much you require.
Mhm.
So it goes hand in hand for people when they, limit their protein. It's called the protein leverage hypothesis. Our bodies are built to consume an amount of protein. And until we meet that amount of protein, we will keep eating. We know this
Mhm.
in certain animals. There's certain animals around the world that are very similar, certain primates. They'll eat um, a continuous amount of food until they meet their protein goal. And if they're eating a very low protein food source, they'll eat excessive amounts
Mhm.
until they get to that amount of protein that their body needs. We are the same way. Humans are the same way. So the more that we can identify those high quality protein sources that we talked about earlier, the grass-fed beef, the wild-caught fish, the pasture-raised eggs and things like that, the really high quality, non-GMO, organically grown vegetable sources that we can combine together, that's going to be a much better play for us. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's a really important point that people understand that protein just doesn't feed the muscles; it also feeds our brain.
Yeah.
It feeds our immune system. When people are
Mhm.
protein deprived, their risk for infection,
Mhm.
opportunistic infection, and a lot of times these infections are things that enter into our gut microbiome goes up significantly. So protein is pervasive in terms of its benefits that it provides us. It's not just for muscles, it's for
Mm.
every cell in the body and every system of the body to
Yeah.
help us achieve optimal health.
Gets that metabolism fired up too because it takes a little bit more work to burn that protein up, right? So we become a metabolic little firehouse, and if you're trying to stay lean as you're moving through perimenopause and menopause, that is huge. So let's talk about women now who train. So I train hard, I work out hard. There's a lot of information out there. Oh, should I work out on an empty stomach? I mean, you hear that over the years. What is the advice when it comes to a person who trains hard? What would a good pre-workout like meal and a post-workout? Let's focus on that just to give people some tips who work out. How far in advance of a workout should they eat, and then what should they be looking at?
Okay. So, yeah, it's very, very rare that anybody should be exercising fasted. I
Mm,
do give some exceptions to that. If you're doing a somewhat moderate time of endurance exercise, as long as you're staying well hydrated and you have the proper amount of electrolytes, you could do a once a week, but I never recommend and would never recommend for someone to do it more than that, just for the purposes of compromising your lean body mass. So, yeah, exercise fasted we know is not ideal. But for people that do want to do it once a week strategically to just kind of kickstart some extra body fat burning,
mhm.
it's acceptable. So I usually encourage just one day, not encourage, but kind of
Allow.
allow that. Yeah. So one day a week of endurance fasted or core. So when you do your core exercise, you could do it fasted as well. But other times you want to go into an exercise routine with an ample amount of amino acids because
Mm,
those are the building blocks. And when you go into an exercise routine, you're breaking them down. So you asked the question, when's the best time? You want to try to nourish your body about an hour
mm,
before you go into the workout. So you have those nutrients available so that the body can begin the rebuilding, repairing process actually while you're exercising, especially if you're doing resistance or high intensity intervals, your body's actually um, slowing down the protein breakdown pathway and it's trying to kickstart the protein synthesis. That's the
mm.
building
Yeah.
pathway. So if you can flood your bloodstream with some. So how much? I usually tell people take about a half of a feeding of what your normal protein pacing meal should be. So using the example that we've been talking about here already, let's say it's 30 to 35 grams. You should be taking about a 15 to, let's say, 18-gram serving before you go into
Mm.
the exercise. You can consume some healthy carbohydrates if you want to in that. So if it's a small little protein shake or a protein bar, or let's say it's a cup of grass-fed Greek yogurt, which is
Hmm.
about that amount. It's about 19 grams. I have some in my refrigerator. That's perfect. Three-quarters of a cup, you get 19 grams of high
Mm.
quality protein. That's my go-to. So that's what I use. If I'm not doing a shake or something like that, that's easily to digest. So that would be a great strategy, making sure that an hour before you're taking in that relatively low calorie but high quality protein pacing, about half the amount that you normally would. And then after the exercise, in your normal eating pattern of every 4 hours in terms of a meal, so using the pre-workout just as a support,
Hmm.
uh, uh, I don't know what you want to call it, snack,
Yeah, yeah.
exercise snack. And then get back onto your normal eating routine and consume the normal amount. So on those days that you're training, consuming an additional 18 grams, in this case that we're talking about, 15 to 18 grams is optimal of
Mm.
what you would need.
So you could even, I guess, if you have your meals kind of worked out, and then on your training days, you could split a meal in half and have half before,
Yes.
half after, as long, but both the pre and the post should have some form of protein in them. Is there a better time to have a carb? Like I used to, if I was having, I would have like an apple with a protein shake and just a protein, not a meal replacement shake. And I usually would place it after my workout. Do you have any ideas for where people should put those carbs? Because if you like fruit, but sometimes I think women are, oh, I don't want to overdo it on the fruit. Well, fruit's fine. Just combine it with protein. And after a workout's a great time, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it depends on the workout. So
Hmm.
depending upon the intensity and the duration of the workout would be when I would, allow somebody, not even allow, but just recommend when they would eat
Right.
that higher carb type food or higher fat type food. Um, it really depends. And so generally speaking, after an endurance bout, that might be, or maybe a longer,
Mm.
more challenging workout, you could do the carbs because you want to replace those depleted uh, carbohydrate stores that you have in your body. We call it glycogen. So yeah, that could be an appropriate time to take in some of the carb after, and maybe do a protein fat before or something like that.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
changing up, and again, I don't hold this set in stone because so many people's metabolisms are a little bit
Yeah.
different. And once you have metabolic flexibility, that's the body's ability to choose the appropriate fuel source when it needs it. Some people's metabolic flexibility is a little bit more swayed toward burning carbohydrates a little
Hmm.
bit more, some a little bit more fat. And so you have to know your body and what works best for you. But generally speaking, yeah, after an endurance bout, I would feel it would be more appropriate to consume the carbohydrates after and maybe do a protein fat before, because that's the energy that you would be using, along with some carbs that you would have to replace. So yeah, you have to just maybe play around with that a little bit. The one non-negotiable is the protein, though, that
Hmm.
you want to make sure that you're getting in that same amount of protein. Because a lot of times, Carrie, people who do a lot more endurance exercise, aerobics, what we call cardiovascular aerobic endurance, they like to walk, they
Hmm.
like to run, jog, swim, whatever it is. They think they don't need as much protein, and just the opposite. That type of exercise is very muscle breaking down.
Yeah.
It's very degrading of our muscle protein. So they actually have to increase, especially as we get older. We have to increase that protein to help support that lean body mass. So that's a really
Mm.
important point.
This has been
I
so
generally,
informative. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, just as a general rule of thumb, because you got me thinking about it. Generally, for people that are much more body composition focused, aesthetic focused.
Hmm.
They want to look good. I
Yeah.
generally have them what is called front load their carbohydrates. So I
Mm.
generally have them eat a little bit more carbohydrate earlier in the day so that they have the day to burn it. And as the day moves on, transition over into a little bit more fat,
Yeah.
keeping the protein obviously paced
Consistent.
throughout the day, but just to benefit them from a hormonal standpoint. Really, the hormone I'm speaking of is insulin. So, it's
Mm-hmm.
better to have an insulin uh, for most people. in the morning to the food geared toward the foods you eat so that by the end of the day and especially overnight, you don't have as much insulin because that's a
Yes.
very storage hormone. And for many people, it's what triggers fat storage. That's why
Yeah.
when people eat late at night of the wrong types of foods, think ice cream, pizza, cookies,
Mm.
sweets, things like that, that people like to indulge in as desserts, you're releasing a lot of insulin later on at night. And that's why your friend that you described, it's surprising that they use the dinner as their only meal during the day because that's going to create the greatest insulin surge. That's
Yeah.
going to then really store a lot of energy in their body as fat potentially. So, yeah, that would be a little problematic for a lot of people. She just might have some lucky genes.
Over the long term, right? It's gonna probably
Oh, yeah.
kick her. But the other thing I had to do as I headed into the menopause, post-menopause, and using my brain with the whole insulin and knowing about glucose in my body and everything, it was like after dinner I started putting my walk. I put a walk, so I make sure there's activity, whether it's a bit of a light
Yeah.
yoga stretching in my living room while I have my show on. I'll put my yoga mat out, or I go for a walk with the dog. So I've made sure now that after dinner there's some form of light activity to just make sure I don't have a lot of circulating glucose, insulin before
I
bed.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call those exercise snacks.
Snack. Yeah.
And instead of having a dessert food carbohydrate rich
Mm.
snack, you're having an exercise snack. And that's an excellent strategy, to do something like that at night where
And it
your
doesn't have to
body
be
is
long either. Like 20 minutes on my
no.
bike, I'll do some intervals, maybe just 15, 20 minutes, and I can feel it. I break a little sweat. And then I also make better choices to not go and eat or have a drink
Yeah,
at that point in time, too.
yeah. That's
Thanks
great.
so
Great
much.
advice.
This has been wonderful, very informative. I'm sure everybody got lots of great information. I'm going to ask you one more thing, but I'm just going to plug your book again, The Prize Life. If anybody wants to go and get Dr. Paul's awesome book, it's a nice, easy to read, easy to understand, not too much, heavy science language. Like it's a very much written for the average person to be able to enjoy and get the information. Dr. Paul,
Thank you.
before I let you go, your information, your nutrition planning, The Prize Life, Precision Nutrition is going to be in the Pause app. Can you just give us a little plug for how that's going to look down the road? Because we want people locking in the Pause app for a year at $29.99 because definitely the price will have to go up when we're having so much great things inputted in there. How's it going to look to be able to have access to all your good nutrition
Mhm.
in the Pause app?
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Yeah, it's going to be a very individualized experience for people. That's the most important thing. I think we have so much one size fits all approach, and
Mm-hmm.
it's missing the target, Carrie. I mean,
Mm.
the bullseye is being missed by a large degree. So what I'm most excited about is the prize incorporation into the Pause app. Um, in a very targeted, customized, individualized basis, so that when somebody comes there, it will be prescribing your protein pacing over the
Mm.
4 meals of the day based
Mm-hmm.
on your schedule. When you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, your specific amounts of protein. It's not as simple as just dividing your total amount by four.
Yeah.
We actually, through the science, have targeted when each of those meals should have a little bit more or a little bit less based on
Mm.
a person's individual schedule. And then along with the exercise, and that's a really important component to this, that holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
Nutrition is definitely the starting point, but making sure that you're incorporating healthy forms of multimodal types of movement is really important. And so that's what I'm really excited about to help all of these women manage their daily routine better using nutrition, movement, and mind-body experiences.
Oh, I love it, Dr. Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to talking to you again about some of the other amazing concepts in your book. Have a great day.